Let's quickly paint up our Voidscarred Corsairs from the newly released Q-Team Nachmund box set to a quick tabletop standard.
Then the entirety of the cosmos is accessible to each and every individual's mind, connecting to the great mind, the great spirit.
Welcome back to the channel, collectors. So in this video, we're going to be guiding you step by step of how I'm going to be painting up my very own Voidscarred Corsairs from the newly released Nachmund box set. In this guide, we're going to go through chapter by chapter of the different materials that we'll be covering in this Voidscarred Corsairs so that you can paint up your very own Voidscarred Corsairs in about a day or two. So before we head on to the painting segment, why don't you pay the Class T of 1 like and 1 sub so that we can move on and start painting up our very own Voidscarred Corsairs. So with that out of the way, these are some of the chapters that I'll be covering in this video. Firstly will be the assembly. You guys do not know the pain it takes to assemble these 10 guys because the GW designers have done it once again, putting all the parts just as randomly as possible. You just have to scour the entire sprue in order to find the part that you require. The next step we're going to go through very quickly. Contrast stage. Contrast is really important for this stage, and I'm going to show you guys step by step of how I choose the colors and then how I'm going to be applying them to achieve quick and efficient results. So after the contrast stage, most of the model is going to be complete, which leaves us a lot of time to focus on the little details, such as the green gems, the glowing eyes, the power weapons, the leather cloaks, and the desert basing that we'll be doing for this entire Q team. So without further ado, let's head on to the first chapter. Let's go! So in this chapter, honestly, there's nothing much. It's just me and my thoughts while assembling the model. Trust me, it's really painful, and unless you are mentally prepared to go through this, just psych yourself up and let's go. Alright, so what I recommend you to do is to just follow the instructions and build accordingly to the name characters. These are the characters that you'll be using for your Q team. However, there are some options for the leaders and the heavy gunners. I would say that this Games Workshop designer definitely put all of us through hell because just looking for the parts to build a leader, I spent close to 10 to 20 minutes just to get the parts out, and this is definitely a new level of hell for me. The parts that are of option are definitely similar enough to each other, so if you were to just use the parts that are not in the stats, I would say that it's definitely not such a big deal. So when I cut the parts out, this is what I'm doing. I'm just really trying to find the parts, and you can see just by building a leader, it took parts from all 3 sprues. How insane is that? Okay, so after the rough cuts, I'm gonna take out the little nubs using a flat clipper right here. Just clip away all the flats, and then as you can see, this is the amount of nubs that I removed. Okay, so we're going to start assembling the miniatures. Okay, with a sharp razor, I'm just going to remove some of the flesh and some of the mold lines to make the miniature look as good as possible. And just removing some of the nubs by scraping the reverse edge. Okay, next up, I'm going to be using a little bit of plastic cement, and I'm just going to put into the contact points. I think what Games Workshop has done really well is that they tell you where are the contact points that you should be putting glue on for each step, and that was really helpful. Okay, so I'm just gluing on the parts right here. Hold it in for a couple of seconds and the part should be ready. Well, the assembly was really traumatic to me, but I'm glad I've done it so that you don't have to do it. But if you're doing it yourself, good luck. Next up, we're going to go through the fun stage, which is contrast. I use contrast to roughly sketch out the color composition to see whether this makes sense or whether I like the color combinations. So watch on more to see how I'm going to do it. Let's go. Alright, it's time for contrast. After the zenithal highlight of 1005 grey and 1005 white, I'm going to be using apothecary white for the white armor. For this speed paint, I'm going to be limiting the color use. So I'm going to make sure that the entire armor is as uniform color as possible. So for this stage, I'm just going to use apothecary white for all the armors, and I'm just going to do this for the rest of the Q-Team as well. So as you can see, I'm just very liberally slapping on the Apothecary White, and after that, I'm just going to make sure that there isn't any unnecessary pooling around the model. So next on, I'm going to be using a mix of Basilicarium Grey and Guilliman Flesh. This is a custom mix and I'm going to be using this for the leather color. Why I'm using this leather color is I wanted something that's a bit more desaturated and slightly lower in value, and I felt that Guilliman Flesh is definitely something good because it's very thin and it helps thin down the mixture. Next up, I'm going to be using Guilliman Flesh for all the exposed areas of the flesh, such as the faces and the hands. I would say that Guilliman Flesh on its own doesn't really need to be thinned down. However, I found that after thinning down some Guilliman Flesh, it really helps to vary the different skin tones, and elves tend to be a little bit more pale skinned, so I would say thin it down just a little bit. Next up, I'm going to be using Skeleton Horde, and I'm going to be painting all the weapons in this Skeleton Horde. I'm thinking that they are all going to be made out of this Wravebone material, and hence I'm going to be using Skeleton Horde for the weapons right here. Next up, I'm going to be using a little bit of wildwood. I'm going to be using wildwood to paint up the leather areas and some of the straps. I find that wildwood is a little bit more red than the custom mix that I've done previously, so it's nice to have a little bit of variation and a little bit of contrast in the different materials. I'm also going to be using wildwood right here for the falcon or hawk thing that this guy is carrying. So moving on, before the paint dries, I'm just going to add in a little bit of Apothecary White just to hope that the paint kind of diffuses into itself and creates a very smooth transition. Next up, I'm going to be using a custom color here, the ratio of 10 Plague Bearer Flesh to 1 Warp Lightning. I find that this custom color creates a very nice neon green glow. However, if you would like to be a little bit more lazy, you can just use the Tesseract glow that GW has already produced for the Necron weapons. That is something that you can use in exchange for this color that I've custom made myself. Next up, I'm going to be creating some varied hair colors. For the redhead, right here, I'm going to be using Gore Grunter fur. Alternatively, you can use Skeleton Horde to create a more blonde look, or if you want, you can use Black Templars if you want to create elves with black hair. It's entirely up to you. So once all the base coats have been completed, I'm just going to be using Streaking Grime here to further define the armor and create more definition. Don't worry if it looks a little bit too heavy here, I'm going to be cleaning up in just a little bit. If you don't have any enamel washes, it's fine too, because I think the Apothecary White has really done a superb job. And I'm going to be doing this for the rest of the models as well. Next up, I'm going to be using a sponge with a little bit of mineral spirits. I'm just going to wipe off the excess. And this leaves the Streaking Grime in the absolute deepest recesses and gives a very sharp definition. Something that I really like when painting miniatures. Now that the contrast stage is over, we're going to go through the little details. First up is the green gems. Alright, let's go. So next up, we're going to be painting the gems. All the gems have already been base coated in black, and I'm just going to be drawing little U-shapes with dark green right here. This little U-shape is in the opposite direction of where the light is coming from, because light tends to collect at the bottom surface inside the gem itself. Next up, I'm going to be adding in a little bit of frog green into the mix, and I'm going to be creating a stronger highlight. This is the crux of the U-shape at the bottom, so you just want to do this in a very limited fashion. Don't overdo this and you'll be just fine. So if you can see right here, the gem is really starting to look a little bit more like a gem, and the next stage will really seal the deal. I'm going to be adding a little bit of greenish white here just to create the highlight. And moving on, if you really want, you can add a little bit of greenish white into the frog green, and this will create a sort of small saturated highlight that you can tip at the bottom of the miniature. So as you can see, this is what I'm doing here. I didn't realize that I've recorded it, but yeah, this is what I'm doing here. Sorry for a little bit of the overexposure, camera going a little bit crazy, but this is how the gem is supposed to look. Now that the green gems are complete, we're going to focus on the weapons. Many of the Voidscarred Corsairs are holding daggers or swords, so we're going to paint them out as green power weapons. So are you ready? Let's go! Alright, so next up we're going to be edge highlighting the power weapons. Moving on, I'm going to be using the same color that I used to highlight the gems just now. I'm just going to be doing a very mild edge highlight. This edge highlight here really reinforces the edges and makes the tips look extra sharp. Next up, I'm going to be adding a little bit of greenish white into the mix, and I'm just going to be focusing on the areas that need to be reinforced. And these areas tend to be the tips, tend to be the sharpest areas, tend to be the edges. You don't want to do this on the entire length of the edge because you want to have some areas of focus. So now that the green power weapons and the green gems have been complete, the last green thing we're going to do is the green object source lighting on the eyes. I know object source lighting can be a little bit complicated, but don't worry. This is a tabletop guide and it's designed to be quick and easy. So ready? Let's go! Alright, so at the first stage of object source lighting, what we're going to do is we're going to wash the area of influence using warp lightning. I find that this is really useful because it really allows the light to leak out of the light source, and it gives the viewer an impression that the light is influencing the area around the light source. Next up, I'm adding in a little bit of frog green and dark green. This is going to be for base coating. I'm going to be paying particular attention to the shape of the light source, and I'm just coating it so that the viewer can see where the light is coming from. Next up, I'm going to be adding in a little bit of greenish white, and this is going to be where the light source is going to come from. Just need to put a dot where the light is coming from, and this gives the impression of object source lighting very quickly and very easily. Pure greenish white is used here just to mark out the exact point of the light, and I think your object source lighting is going to be A-OK. The next biggest surface other than armor is the brown leather cloaks that we have designed on these Voidscarred Corsairs. We're going to do this really quickly using the overbrush method. If you're not sure what overbrushing is, check out these videos right here. Alright, links will also be in the description. Okay, without further ado, let's get overbrushing right now. So next up, we're going to be distressing and aging the leather. I'm going to be using the technique called overbrush. Overbrush works the best if you have a really old and shitty brush. So yeah, don't throw your brushes away. So after that, we're going to be using just mud brown and just going to be flicking in to create some lines and different textures for the aged leather. Don't worry if this looks a little bit messy because in the later stages, we're going to be refining it with a slightly, well, less aged brush. Next up, I'm going to be adding in grimy grey, and I'm still going to be doing this in an overbrush method, but remember, one tip here is you want to be reducing the amount of paint on the brush so that the streaks are a lot less aggressive than the first stage. Next up, I'm also going to be doing a little bit of stippling right here just to create some random textures. Alright. Next up, with pure grimy grey, I'm just going to be touching the edges. I'm just going to be drawing some streaks and lines to show the distension of the leather, trying to show that it's been worn and chipped, being scratched, and this texture makes the leather look really awesome. Let's quickly round out this project by basing the miniatures so that you can play the entire Voidscarred Corsairs Q team fully painted. Okay, let's go. So next up, I'm just going to be putting on some pigment. The base has already been applied using AK's dried ground, and this dusting of the bottom creates a transition from the base to the model. I find that this technique is very fast and efficient, and after that you can always seal the entire setup using some pigment fixer from AK. And there we have it. This is the final result of my Voidscarred Corsairs. I really enjoyed the entire painting process, and the entire thing took roughly about 8 to 10 hours, which I think is pretty respectable. Hope you found this useful. Oh, you're still here! Thanks for watching all the way to the end. If you're still watching till now, I hope that you found this video useful, and I hope that you can paint up your very own Voidscarred Corsairs very quickly and very efficiently. So if you did find this video useful, please give me one like and one sub so that it helps my channel grow. And if you want to support the channel even further, head on to the Patreon and just be a patron. Every single dollar goes into paying the bills so that we can produce more videos such as this. I'd like to thank my patrons for allowing me to do this, and I hope that I can see you in the next painting video. See you!